Have you ever felt that someone you lost wasn't really gone, not in memory, not in spirit, but in some deeper way still with you, still waiting, still connected? For years, Sarah carried the quiet ache of a goodbye she never truly said. Her husband had passed suddenly. No warning, no closure, just silence. But silence doesn't always mean absence, because months after his passing, something strange began to happen. At first, it was small things, a familiar scent when no one else was around, a word he used to say, whispered, barely audible, in the stillness between sleep and waking, moments that made her pause, but pass, until one night. She dreamed, and in that dream, she wasn't Sarah, she was someone else, somewhere else. And he was there too, but not as she remembered, not with the same face or the same name, but with the same soul. The feeling was unmistakable, the pull, the warmth, the grief, returning in a form she never expected. She didn't go searching for him, not consciously, but her soul remembered. And sometimes, when the soul remembers, it leaves a door unlocked. This is the story of what happens when that door opens, when the pain of this life becomes the echo of another, and when love refuses to disappear. So stay with me, because what Sarah discovered through past life regression wasn't just memory. It was reunion, and in that reunion, a lesson that may change how you understand grief, healing, and the true shape of love. Let's begin. The decision didn't come quickly. Sarah spent months in hesitation, skeptical, afraid of what she might find, afraid of what she might not. But one evening, sitting by the window of her quiet home, she whispered to the silence, "If you're still out there, show me." And maybe that was enough, because soon after, a friend mentioned a therapist, one who specialized in past life regression. Sarah didn't want a show. She didn't want mysticism. She wanted peace. So she booked the session and arrived with her heart half open and half afraid. The room was warm, not mystical, not strange, just still. Soft light, a blanket, a gentle voice guiding her breath. And slowly, the noise began to fade. The past, the grief, the doubt, all dissolved into something quieter. Then, an image, not a dream, not quite memory, but something else. She was walking through a narrow street, stone beneath her feet, a basket in her hands. Her clothes were simple, old, hand-stitched. It was not this time, not this world, but it felt familiar. The sun hit her face, and across the road, a man stood beside a wooden shop, carving, focused. And when he looked up, something in her soul stopped. She didn't know his name, but her heart did. The memory unfolded gently, like pages of a book she'd already read, but forgotten she loved. They were lovers, simple, deep, a love made not of fireworks, but of firewood, warm, enduring, quiet. And then he left. Varm, uniforms, a promise. "I will return, I swear it." But he didn't. The memory lingered on her lips, like a prayer she never finished. In the regression, she remembered herself, waiting by the window for months, then years. The hands of time turned, her hair grayed, and she died with that name still in her heart. And in those final moments, as she lay in a small bed in a quiet room, she saw him, not in flesh, not in voice, but in spirit. And he said just this, "I could not find you then, but I will find you again." Sarah woke up weeping, not from sadness, but from recognition, from the sense that something ancient had just been returned to her. Her first words after the session were barely a whisper. It wasn't a dream, it was us. And in that moment, she realized she hadn't been grieving just one loss. She had been grieving 100, from lifetimes ago. But now, she had a name, a feeling, a map. And that map was about to lead her to someone standing just beyond the edge of her everyday life. In the next part of this story, we'll follow what happened after the regression, when Sarah meets someone in this life whose soul echoes the man she lost, and what unfolds when you recognize someone with your heart before your mind even understands why. In that quiet room, with her body still and her breath slow, Sarah slipped deeper, The therapist's voice was calm, distant, like a hand guiding her through fog. And then she was there. Not in Oregon, not in this lifetime, but somewhere else entirely. She could smell the sea, salt in the wind, warm stone beneath bare feet. She was standing in front of a small house by the cliffs, whitewashed walls, ivy crawling along the edges, a garden of herbs, a dog barking lazily nearby. Her name was not Sarah, it was Anais, and she lived a simple life. In a small village by the coast of northern Spain. It was the late 1600s, a quiet time, until he arrived. She didn't remember the moment she first saw him, only how it felt, like a ripple in still water, like a familiar song, played from another room. His name was Matthias, a woodworker, gentle hands, eyes like dusk. They met when he repaired the door to her cottage, but their real conversation was silence. She didn't need his words. He didn't need hers. Their connection wasn't loud. It wasn't fireworks. It was warmth, soft, steady warmth like the fire they built together every evening. They were married the following spring. No ceremony, no guests, just two souls making a promise they'd made before. I will stay until the end. So will I. And for years, they did, until the world changed. A war no one in their village had asked for reached their doorstep. Matthias was conscripted. He didn't want to go, but he had to. On the morning he left, he placed something in her hand, a wooden ring carved from the tree behind their house. "This is made from where we built our life," he said. "So even if I can't come back, a part of me always will." Then he walked away, and Anais, Sarah, waited. Weeks turned into months. No letters, no word, just wind and fire and the ache of missing. The seasons passed, and deep inside, she just knew. In the regression, Sarah felt every year of that waiting. She felt the weight of each morning waking up alone, the silence at the dinner table, the empty space on the other side of the bed, the way her body aged, but her love never did. And when Anais finally passed, old, quiet, alone, her last thought was not sorrow. It was a whisper, "I will find you again." In the waking world, Sarah's body trembled. Her cheeks were wet, her hands clenched the blanket, like it was the only thing anchoring her to the present. She had just lived another lifetime, loved, lost, and loved still. And when she opened her eyes, the first thing she said wasn't a word. It was a name, Matthias. But the story wasn't over, because a few days later, in a grocery store of all places, Sarah turned a corner and came face to face with a man she hadn't seen in years. His name was David, a quiet friend from the past. Gentle eyes, hands like dusk. And when he smiled, her soul paused. In the next chapter, we'll follow that moment, the stillness between two people meeting again. Not for the first time, but for the first time in this life, Sarah didn't believe in fate. Not really. She believed in choices, in timing, in hard lessons that life delivers without explanation. But that day, in the middle of a grocery store aisle, all of that logic, disbelief, grief stood still, because standing just a few feet in front of her was David. She hadn't seen him in almost 2 years. They weren't close friends, more like gentle acquaintances. He had helped her with some paperwork after her husband passed. Kind eyes, a quiet voice, nothing more. But now, something was different. And it wasn't him, it was her. Because the moment she looked into his eyes, something ancient stirred. It wasn't recognition of the mind. It was the kind of knowing that lives in the body, the kind that makes your breath slow, the kind that makes time feel suddenly soft. They spoke small talk. At first, "How are you? Didn't expect to see you here." But underneath the words, something else was happening. "He looked at me like we had spoken 1,000 times before," Sarah would later say, "and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had lost him once already." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept remembering the final moment of her regression, when Matthias whispered, "I will find you again." And now here was David, alive, present, with the same quiet hands, the same gentle steadiness, even the small scar on his left knuckle, the same place where Matthias had been injured in the memory. Coincidence? She tried to tell herself yes, tried to laugh it off, but her soul wasn't laughing. The next day, she looked at an old photo from her regression, a sketch she had asked the therapist to draw from her description. The face wasn't clear, but the posture, the gaze, the presence, it matched. She reached out, invited David to coffee. They sat under soft light, steam rising from their cups, and for the first time, she allowed the question to come out awkward, unsure, trembling on the edge of belief. "David, have you ever felt like you knew someone before you met them?" He didn't laugh. He didn't look confused. He just stared into his drink for a moment, then nodded slowly. "With you, yes," he said. "Sometimes I have dreams. I'm carving something. You're there. You always smile, like I'm home." Sarah felt her fingers tighten around the handle of her cup. She didn't know whether to cry or breathe or run, but one thing she knew deep, unshakably, this was not random. They began to talk more. Long walks, quiet conversations, shared silences. David never claimed to be anyone from her past, but he felt like something returned. Not a replacement, not a projection, but a resonance. Weeks passed. Then one night, as they walked beneath a winter sky, David said something simple. "I can't explain this, but I feel like loving you is something I've already practiced. In another life." Sarah didn't respond with words. She just took his hand. And in that moment, she didn't see Matthias. She didn't see her husband. She saw David. Now, whole, real, and somehow enough. In the next part, we'll explore how Sarah reconciled memory with reality, how she stopped searching for a ghost and started choosing love right where she stood. Sarah knew what people would say, that she was projecting, that it was wishful thinking. That grief had blurred her judgment, and she was looking for something that simply wasn't there. But if it was fantasy, why did it feel so real? If it was coincidence, why did it keep happening? David didn't know about her regression at first. She kept it to herself, not out of shame, but because some truths live best in silence until they are ready to be spoken. They continued seeing each other, slowly. No labels, no promises, just presence. But as their connection deepened, so did the echoes. The way he reached for her hand, identical to the moment Matthias had done so by the firelight. The tone in his voice when he said her name, carrying warmth she had not heard since that regression. Even the way he sat, elbows resting on knees, head tilted as he listened, was an exact mirror of the man in that other life. Eventually, she told him. One evening, by the window where her late husband used to sit, the candle flickered, and she whispered, "I need to tell you something strange, and maybe beautiful." She spoke not just of regression, but of memory, loss, love, and the way some names seem written across lifetimes. David didn't interrupt. He didn't laugh. When she finished, he exhaled slowly. "That makes more sense than anything else," he said. "I felt like I was waiting for you, not in this life, but somewhere beyond it." Science would offer explanations. Cryptomnesia, false memory, the brain protecting itself through story. And Sarah respected those ideas. She wasn't trying to convert anyone. She wasn't claiming to have proof. What she had was peace. And peace does not demand to be believed. Dr. Brian Weiss once wrote, "Sometimes the heart knows things long before the mind understands." Sarah's mind still questioned, but her heart felt like it had returned home. She no longer asked if David was Matthias reborn. That wasn't the point. What mattered was what their connection awakened in her. A love without fear, a bond without need for control, a quiet knowing that whatever this was, it was real enough to stay. And isn't that what most of us want? Not proof, not perfect answers, just a moment, a presence, a feeling that reminds us we are not alone in this life. And maybe, just maybe, we never were. In the next part of this story, we'll step into that quiet transformation, how Sarah stopped looking back and began walking forward with a heart that no longer needed to find love, because she had already become it. There's a moment in grief when something shifts, not suddenly, not loudly, but gently, like the tide turning at night. For Sarah, that moment came quietly, not during a breakthrough, not in another regression, but in a small, ordinary day, folding laundry, A ray of sunlight across her kitchen floor, David humming in the background absently, softly, and just like that, she smiled. Not because she remembered something, but because, for the first time in years, she didn't need to, for so long. Sarah's heart had been tied to a memory, a beautiful one, sacred, real, but still a memory. And memories, however deep, are not where we live. They are where we look back. David was not Matthias, not exactly, and Sarah no longer needed him to be, because love had changed. It wasn't about reclaiming the past. It was about choosing the present. With open eyes, with a healed heart, with reverence for everything that had led her here. In spiritual teachings, they say soulmates don't always arrive to complete you. Sometimes, they arrive to awaken you. David didn't arrive to replace the man Sarah had lost. He arrived to help her remember the woman she had once been, and the woman she could become again. For the first time, I wasn't loving from fear, Sarah said. I wasn't clinging. I wasn't grieving. I was simply loving. Not because she was afraid to lose, but because she had finally learned that love, true love, can never be lost. They never rushed into a relationship. There were no grand declarations, no timeline, no demands, just stillness, trust, and something sacred that bloomed slowly. Between the cracks of old pain, Sarah began journaling again. She wrote letters not to Matthias, but to herself. Letters of release, letters of gratitude, letters of permission to live again, to feel again, to stop chasing the ghost, and start dancing with the wind. In that stillness, she felt something awaken, a knowing that love is not about reunion. It is about recognition, and recognition is not limited to the face, but to the energy that meets you and says, I see you as you are, as you've always been. That was the gift of regression. Not just the memory of a lost love, but the return of the capacity to love again and to love differently, less from longing, more from presence, less from history, more from soul. In the final part of this story, we will return to Sarah one last time, not in sorrow, but in stillness, to reflect on what it means to meet a lost loved one again, not to reclaim what was, but to honor what always is. Sarah never claimed to understand it all. She couldn't explain how a face from centuries ago found its way back into her life, wearing a different name, speaking a different language, but carrying the same silence she once fell in love with. And she didn't need to, because by the end of her journey, she had stopped asking, was it real? And started asking, what did it teach me? Love, she had come to realize, is not always meant to be proven. Sometimes, it is simply meant to be felt. Across years, across forms, across lifetimes, the regression didn't return her to a man. It returned her to a truth, that love, once shared soul to soul, never truly ends. It changes, it grows, and when the time is right, it returns. Sometimes in memory, sometimes in a person, sometimes in a quiet afternoon, sunlight that touches your shoulder, just the way he used to. People often ask Sarah if she believes David was Matthias. She smiles when they do, then says softly, I don't need him to be. What matters is how he made me feel safe enough to open again. And maybe that's what love is at its highest. Not a dramatic reunion, but a safe return to the version of yourself that's no longer afraid to feel deeply. So what do we take from all of this? That grief doesn't always end with time, but with understanding. That memory can be more than biological. It can be spiritual, a pulse from the soul, reaching across lifetimes to remind us that nothing meaningful is ever truly lost. If you've ever felt that someone you just met has been with you before, in some form, in some echo, maybe you're not imagining it, maybe you're remembering. If this story touched something in you, a name, a feeling, a question you haven't dared to ask, then maybe it's time. Time to listen, time to open, time to remember. Share your thoughts below. Have you ever met someone your heart already seemed to know? And if you feel called, subscribe. We'll be exploring more real journeys like Sarah's, stories where memory, healing, and love move far beyond the borders of a single life. Until next time, keep listening. The soul remembers, even when we forget.